I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous filming this video. You have no idea. Like, I'm literally shaking. Like, I have never made a video like this before. And the reason why that I am even making this video is because I have a platform with a lot of women on here and a lot of young women and young girls, and there's a lot of things in my past that I have gone through that a lot of you are going through in this exact moment, and this video is to truly inspire you and to give you hope to know that if you keep fighting and you keep thinking positive, that you can get through it too. I have been through so much, and I think it's finally time to actually sit down and share with you guys, you know, the things that I have gone through and the things that I have went through. I do want to say that I am not looking for any sympathy whatsoever from this video. I'm not looking to gain anything from this video. And also, I just don't want any hate on my past and on anyone from this video, because I have come to accept my past and accept the things that happened to me. I just want to move forward from it. So this video is really just to kind of share with you guys on a deeper level of who I am as a person, what I have overcome, and hopefully inspire those who are going through the same thing that I went through. And the reason why I really wanted to do this is because my purpose in life is to truly inspire. I really want to inspire young women and women overall to just do what makes them happy and to become the better version of themselves. And if this video can give you hope or inspiration in any type of way, then that's just what I want this to be about. So I am going to pretty much do my makeup as I talk to you guys about my life story. I will list everything down below, so anything that you see that I use, I will link it in the description below if you want to go ahead and check it out. But let's just kind of dive right into this video, and yeah, let's get into it. So I'm really nervous right now. I don't know if you can tell by even just me talking. I'm having a hard time even talking. So let's kind of just go back to, you know, where I was born and raised. So I was born and semi-raised in Philadelphia with my father and his wife and my three blood sisters, and I had two stepsisters. And not a lot of you know that I was actually born and semi-raised in Philadelphia, but I was always back and forth between Philadelphia and New York, because my mother lived in New York and my father lived in Philadelphia. So let me just give you a backstory on how my father met my mother, or how my mother met my father. So my mother was very young. She came from a very difficult household as a young woman, and she ended up leaving her house when she was, I believe, 14. I'm not like entirely sure, but I believe it was 14 years old. She moved to Philadelphia to live with her aunt because her mother, they just weren't getting along. And that is where she met my father, because my father and her, they lived on the same block. So my father was said to have been a lot older than my mother. I believe she was 14 or 15 at the time that she met my father, and my father was in his late teens or in the beginning of his 20s. I'm not like really sure. But my mom and my father ended up falling in love, and at the age of 15, my mom got pregnant with me, and she ended up giving birth to me at 16 years old. So she was a really young mom, you know. I know that this was something new for her. I know that this must have been a challenge for my mom, because no one at the age of 16 years old or 17 years old is ready to take on the challenge of being a mom. It's not easy, but you know, I know that wasn't her plan, but here I am, you know, she had me. So my mother and my father, they had a really difficult relationship. My father was, he was very abusive, and my mom just really couldn't tolerate the abuse anymore. And so when I turned, I believe it's when I turned, like, I was about 1.5 years old, my mom ends up kind of just like trying to leave my father. And there was kind of like a little battle between who was going to keep me. Was it going to be her or was it going to be him? And they just kept going back and forth. There was a lot of drama that I still to this day don't have a full clear story about, you know, what the situation was. All I know was that my father was very abusive to my mother, and she just couldn't tolerate it anymore. So from the ages of 1 to 3 years old, I really truly, I can't tell you like exactly where I was in my life, but all I know was that my mother had met a man and they ended up moving to California, where I would move with my mother. Now I remember I have like photos of me in California having like a Barney birthday party, and it's not much that I remember because obviously I was super young, but that is what I know. Now my mom, she had it really rough at a young age. Like I said, she was not ready to, you know, take on the responsibility of being a mother. And my mom always found, and I won't be disclosing any of the names either, so, because like I said, I don't want any hate on my parents or anyone in that matter, because like I said, I am now building a relationship with my mother right now. We are repairing all of the damage, and we have a good relationship right now, so I don't want to screw that up. My mom always found herself in abusive relationships, and I just feel terrible like even saying that, but she, you know, she did. And I remember my mom struggling as a mom, and she would kind of just leave me here and there in relatives' house where I would stay at for a while. So like I would go and like live with my aunt or live with like a family member, and then that person like didn't, you know, want to take care of me anymore, so then I would go to like another family member's house. And so I was just always bouncing back and forth for people to take care of me. And it wasn't until my mom just was like, you know what, I guess it's best for you to go live with your dad. And so I remember like exactly how I saw my father for the first time in like that I could remember his face. So I remember my mom drove to Philly to drop me off. My father was living in the basement of his parents' house. We went inside the basement and he had a friend there by the name of Gato. I love him. He was really nice to me, but sadly he passed away. But his name was Gato, and my father was there, and my father just started kind of like playing games with me. And I remember my mom kind of like pushed me to him, and when she pushed me to him, I just remember like looking at him and just saying, like, I just remember like, wow, like this is my dad, you know? And then when I turned around, my mom was gone, and little did I know that that would be the last time that I saw my mom for many years. I went years without seeing my mom, so I ended up going to school there. And when my father was living in his parents' basement, things were okay because he had the help of his parents helping to kind of like raise me, and nothing was bad. I don't remember anything being terrible at that point. I just remember my grandmother taking care of me a lot, and I had a lot of love for my grandmother, which was my father's mother. So it wasn't until a woman right next door from us moved in the neighborhood, and my father ended up falling in love with this woman, and he ended up marrying her. And that is where things pretty much kind of went downhill for my relationship with my dad, because at one point my relationship with my dad was actually really good. Years later, my mom comes back, she picks me up, I go back to New York for a little while, and at that time I was living with my grandmother, and then I would go back to Philly. And so when I went back to Philly, that is when, for the second time, I would actually stay. When I came back to my parents, well, when I came back to my father's house, he was married to the woman, and they had their first child together. Now, I wasn't there for their wedding, and I wasn't there for the birth of the first child, but when I got there, they just gave birth, like she had just given birth to my first sister from that side. From there, I ended up living with them. I started going to school, but little did I know that my relationship with my stepmother would just be a terrible one. Because of her not really liking me, my father little by little started to also feel the same way. He was just not really fond of me, and I think it was just because I resembled my mom a lot at that time, or at that age. I feel like every time he looked at me, he saw her, and so it just made him upset. Eventually, down the line, I was too much of a reminder to him, and so that's where things started to really become, he started to become very physical. It was said that when my dad was young, he would dabble into drugs here and there, and my father was actually he loved to drink. He was, you know, pretty big drinker. And one night he went to the bar. There was a bar in the corner of our house that he would go to all the time. And he went to this bar. He came home, and I remember him coming upstairs, and that's where the physical abuse began. He called me downstairs, or he came upstairs and told me to come downstairs. And he just started being very abusive, mentally, physically, emotionally. I mean, everything that you could possibly think of is what he was just, it was just too much. He became very abusive. And so this would happen a lot. Like, this would happen all the time. I would even stay up like late at night, because I would know at this time, or at this point, I would know the times that he would come home, and he would, you know, come and basically like literally like he would like beat me. Now, this happened many times, a lot of times actually. I developed trichotillomania, which if you don't know what trichotillomania is, it's basically a nervous condition that you pretty much like yank out your own hair. So I kind of like started to become bald with trichotillomania, because I would just pull my hair out all the time, because I was just so nervous. I was like, and so scared, like what was gonna happen today, like what was he gonna do today. So I ended up, you know, going to school there, and the abuse got so bad that the word got out to my mom. This was years later. I'm talking about, like, I have stories for days on the abuse of this, of the abuse that I endured with him. Like, it was just a lot. There were times where, there was a time where like I couldn't even go to school because of the marks that I had on my body. And it was just crazy. It was insane. So my mom still had a friendship with one of the neighbors that lived on the block. That was actually her best friend, and that's how she would keep tabs on me to see like how I was doing, because she would always like contact her and just to check in, like, you know, how's she doing. This neighbor knew that there was something going on in the house. She didn't know what it was, but she knew that something was happening, and so she, you know, was telling my mom like, hey, you know, I think something's happening, you know, I'm not sure, because the thing with my dad was, my father was like very intimidating. So like not a lot of people on the neighborhood really even like talked to him, because he was just very, like, he was just a very angry person. He fought a lot, like always yelled and had arguments like outside with like his wife and things like that. So like people like saw what like an angry person he was, and so because of that, people really didn't connect with him at all. So it wasn't until, I believe I was in the 5th grade, my father really badly beat me, and the word got to my mom on how bad it was. Now when I talk about bad, I mean very bad, to the point where like if my stepsisters did not pull my father off of me, the question would be, would I still have been here today? That's how bad it was. And the word had gotten out to my mom, and when she found out about this incident, I remember exactly how she came to get me. My mom came from New York, and at the time she was in a relationship who would soon to be her husband. And I remember I was cleaning, because I had a lot of chores. I was always doing like chores in the house. I was always, you know, like they would make me do a lot in the house, a lot of chores, and which I'm not saying is a bad thing, because that's what you are supposed to do. Like I do think that children should have chores and to clean up in the house, but it was a lot that they were making me do. My mom came, I just remember me having this pajama bottom on. I had a Barbie PJ on, and I heard a knock at the door. And when I went to open up the door, when I opened the door, it was my mom. And I hadn't seen her in years, but I just knew. I was like, wow, this is my mom, you know, like it's been a long time since I've seen you. And I just remember her yanking me from the door. She started fighting with my biological dad, with my real father. From there, she took me. He watched me go. I just remember her driving off and me looking back at him because I could see him in the back window. It's crazy because there was a moment where, like, even though what I went through with him was insane and what he put me through was a lot, but I remember looking back in the window and looking at him and saying, like, thinking to myself, like, wow, like I don't want to go. I don't want to leave him, because I thought that he could change and be a great dad. Like, I had hope that we could repair our relationship and that I could be there for him, because we've had our moments where we've had great moments together, but the really bad moments outweigh the great moments. Like I said, I don't really want to go into detail with exactly what happened when I lived in Philadelphia, because a lot of it is just, it's a lot. And one day I know I will be comfortable to really talk about the abuse that I've endured and like everything that I went through, but at this moment, like, I'm just not ready to talk about it because it's a lot, and it's a lot to take in. So once I moved to New York, my mom enrolled me in school there, and we were living in Queens, and everything was great. You know, it was really good. It wasn't until years later, when I went into junior high school, that my mom and I just started to have a lot of problems. And it was because my mom and I, we just did not get along. Like, we tried, but she was so young and she was half my age. So she was more like a sister to me. I don't know how to explain it, but we just did not get along. We did not see eye for eye, and we were always fighting, my mom and I, like always fighting. It was just really bad. The good thing is that I really didn't endure a lot of physical abuse from her. Like, let me tell you, my mom, when she would give me a pela, like, she would give me a pela, but she really didn't abuse me a lot like my father did. You know, my mom, just the way she would pretty much punish me was to take away like my devices and things like that. But in the end of the day, her and I, we did not get along, and that would eventually result into me just like being super rebellious against her. The thing with my mom was that, in my eyes, my mom would like always put the man above her children. So like anything that the man wanted, like she would just, it really didn't matter, you know, like I didn't like that. I would always kind of like tell her like, hey, why are you doing this? I would feel neglected by her. I would feel like she wasn't listening to me. And then on top of that, like, you know, I had a lot of trauma from my past, a lot, you know, like I needed help. I needed to seek a therapist. I needed to really get that situated, because that's in the back of my head with the relationship with my mom. And there were a lot of the reason why we had issues was because of a lot of things that I went through when I was with my father, you know, a lot of it. When little did I know, all I needed and all I wanted from my mom was to acknowledge the fact, or acknowledge what she did, and just be here for me. Like, my mom just didn't know how to do that. She didn't know how to really be here for me in a way that I needed her. And I think that's where our relationship really kind of just like took a dive, because I wasn't understanding what I needed. And as a child, I was broken, I was damaged, and I needed help, and she didn't understand that. When I was 17 years old, there was an incident that happened in the house, and I'm not gonna really go into detail on exactly like what the situation was, but my mom pretty much just did not believe me in the situation, which resulted in her kicking me out of the house when I was 17 years old. Now, I had nowhere to go. I had no money. I pretty much like, I had nothing. I literally had nothing. And my mom, you know, was just like, you know, I want nothing to do with you and I want you to leave the house. And I just remember, like, when I left the house, I just remember looking back and saying, I'm never coming back. I'm never dealing with this again. Like, this is it for me. So my stepdad at the time ended up dropping me off at a motel nearby where I worked. And I remember my mom telling him, like, you know, don't pay for anything. Like, let her pay for it herself, you know, even though I had no money. So he ends up dropping me off at this motel. I remember getting to this this motel, and crying and talking to the manager and explaining to the manager what just happened to me. And the manager felt so bad in this motel that, you know what he did? He let me stay a week free of charge. Within that week, I ended up, you know, like traveling to work with my luggage because I just was not comfortable with leaving my stuff in the motel. You know, I didn't want people to like take my stuff from me. So I would travel to work, like, you know, with my luggage, and my managers were just like, what's going on? Like, what's going on with you? And I explained to them what happened. You know, I was kicked out from home, practically like homeless, and I didn't have any money. And I just basically explained to them, like, you know, what was really going on with me. And they were like, all right, well, we're gonna support you, we're gonna help you out. So they gave me a raise, ended up getting a higher position in my job, and that's pretty much kind of like how my retail experience went. So I ended up having to literally drop out of college because I couldn't afford to pay the tuition. I didn't have the money for the tuition, and also I could not get financial aid on my own until I was the age of 26. Now here I am, you know, I don't have money. I did get a little bit of a raise. I had to leave school because I don't have the money to pay for my education. So from there, I ended up just pretty much like working my ass up to the top when it came to retail. So I ended up just, you know, working my way into manager roles and ended up making a lot of money doing that. And let me just tell you that in the retail world, you can make a lot of money, like a lot. So it got to the point where I ended up working in Queens Center Mall, and then I decided that I was going to rent a room in Jackson Heights. So I ended up renting a room in Jackson Heights where I was then rooming. I was paying $400 for a tiny room. Like, I'm talking about the smallest room you could ever see in your whole life. And I was paying $400, and I was rooming with this like family from Argentina who they did not speak English, and my Spanish was not that great. I lived there for a little while, and I'm super grateful for that move. And then from there, I ended up, you know, just like I said, working my way up in the company. And then from there, I ended up moving to another apartment in Queens. But this time I had my basement apartment. So this was like new to me. I'm like, ooh, I have a kitchen, and, you know, I have my own space. I'm paying $800 a month for this. And I was just overall like super excited because this was an accomplishment for me. Like, you know, I worked my ass off to get this basement apartment all on my own. And I still at this time was not talking to any of my family members. I literally cut everybody off. I did not talk to anyone, and I just was like, you know what? I'm gonna do this all on my own, and I don't really need the help from anyone. And then from there, I ended up taking another promotion in my job, and that's where I relocated to New Jersey. So I was living in Jersey, and this time I had gotten another apartment. It was a 1-bedroom apartment, and it was so beautiful. Like, I mean, for me, it was beautiful from what I came from, like what I had in the past, because, you know, what I had in the past, it just wasn't that great, you know? And here I am living in Jersey City. I'm alone. I have my own apartment, and, you know, I'm feeling so like accomplished. I'm feeling like I'm getting somewhere with my life. And at this time when I was living in New Jersey, my mom had came around, and we were trying to work on a relationship, but it just was not working out. Her and we just kept arguing and fighting, and we just kept bringing up the past and how much she hurt me, and it was just like a hurt that I just was not over. That was my mindset, right? I wasn't thinking about her mindset. And now that like I'm a little bit older and I kind of understand the situation, I not that I understand, because in the end of the day I would never kick out my daughter, and that is one of my mom's like biggest regrets in her life, is doing that. And you know, she has apologized for that, and I've also apologized for what I put her through too, because let me tell you, I also put my mom through a lot. I'm so grateful for everyone and all of my bosses that I've had in retail, because they have taught me a lot about what I know when it comes to business, and really how to like run a business, which is amazing. While I was in New Jersey, I ended up leaving Victoria's Secret to take a job in Queens. So it was a little difficult because, you know, I was living in New Jersey. It was just hard, like the travel was really hard. So this is where, like right before I took this job though, I got with my boyfriend who I'm with today now, which is Glambykyanie. And let me tell you, once Glambykyanie stepped into my life, that's when everything made sense. Like everything started to make sense for me. I was able to connect with his family on another level, where like they actually truly showed me like what a family is, what a family looks like. What ended up happening was I ended up kind of like staying at his house a lot, because it was super convenient for me to get to work. From there, I guess I would just say I ended up kind of like moving in with him and his family. It was a little rocky in the beginning, but we ended up making it work. So now him and we have our own place, we live in our own apartment, and we're doing really well. Honestly, he is the best thing that has ever in my whole life that has ever happened. And babe, if you're watching this video, I mean, you're right next door, but if you are watching this video, I want you to know that like you truly changed my whole life and the way that I think about life overall. And if it wasn't for you, like I don't even know what I would be doing. I would be so mentally fucked up, because man, like I really didn't get into detail with everything that really happened in my past and in my life, because a lot of it is very hard to talk about. Like I did go through a lot at a young age. You know, my father was abusive, my mother was neglecting what I really needed as a child, and putting her men before me, her husband, you know, before me. And you know, it was rough. Like I really didn't have that family that I should have had, you know, like I really didn't know what it was like to have a real family. That really sucks to say, but it's the truth. I had no idea what it was like to have a real family until my boyfriend came along. Me, what definitely hurt me a lot, or what hurt me the most as I was growing up and trying to accept my past, was the abuse that I endured from my father and the way my father left me. But I will say this, at a young age, I did go through a lot. I endured a lot of things in my past, but one thing about me is that I never gave up. I'm gonna tell you that and be completely honest, like I had some very dark moments in my life where I turned to alcohol to like, you know, just to get those feelings out and to not feel them. I at one point was, you know, questioning if my existence in this world, if I should even exist, you know, like it got very deep, very deep, and I just knew to never give up. I wanted to take everything that happened to me and do something great and kind of like prove to everybody that I don't need anyone. I will say, like, you know, everything that I went through in my life, I wouldn't change it for a thing, because if I were to change anything that has ever happened to me, then would I be who I am today? Like, would I be that person who I am, the way that I think, the woman that I am today, and what I have accomplished? You know, there's a lot of things in this video that I didn't even really touch on or really even kind of like talk about, because it's very deep. But the purpose of this video is I wanted you to kind of see a lot of the things that I did endure as a child and how it affected me mentally as I grew up, but how I never gave up on myself. I never gave up on my purpose. I never gave up on who I wanted to be. And I took everything that happened to me and I made something out of it. right? Because I easily could have took the easy route of, you know, getting into drugs, even having suicidal thoughts, things like that. I got there at some point in my life, and I got past it. And I want those right now who are going through the same thing that I went through at some point to know that, one, you're not alone. I've been there. I've walked the same road that you're walking right now. And I will tell you that if you don't lose faith, things will get better. Continue to be strong, continue to be determined, and the most important thing is don't ever give up on yourself, because that is what matters the most. I really hope that this video kind of like, you know, not, like I said, I wasn't trying to gain anything out of this video. I didn't want any sympathy. I just wanted you guys to know a little bit about me and just to understand me as a person a little bit more. I've never gotten deep like this my whole life. I've never gotten this deep in a video before. I hope that this video inspires you, really motivates you. For those who are going through the same thing that I went through, I'm here for you. We can talk. And I really hope that this made a difference and inspired you to never give up on yourself. Because I didn't. And I will never give up on who I am as a person and what I want in life, and I'll never give up on me. So I love you guys. For those who stuck around this whole video, thank you so much. And I will see you guys on my next video. Bye.